we are going to talk to Anthony. Hello, Anthony. You are on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Yeah, I saw the title of today's video was Do We Have a Soul? And I wanted to discuss that with you.
Cool. That's one of my faves.
Yeah, so I do believe we have a soul, and I believe it's logically deducible to understand this. We can't know all the details, but we can kind of understand that it's the most likely and reasonable possibility. And the reason I think this is because, to me, the question of whether we have a soul is kind of equivalent to the idea of continuation of consciousness after death, which I think is more likely than the extinguishing of consciousness after death. So that's kind of where I am. I guess my question to you first, would you agree that if consciousness continues after death, or let me ask this, consciousness cannot be explained entirely in terms of brain processes or
that's not
physical,
necessarily true.
Chemical. Well, yeah, I'm just trying to establish a premise. If it's true that consciousness cannot necessarily be, if it's true that consciousness cannot be proven to be entirely based on physical processes, that means some aspect of our consciousness is not contingent on the physical body. Okay, so that
I
means
don't hold
some
that premise to be true, but you're asking me to follow you along a premise that I don't believe is true.
I understand that. I know you don't believe that. What I'm just trying to say is, if it's true that consciousness...
Okay, what's your reasoning for thinking that that's true?
Well, I just want you to agree that if consciousness
you can want me to agree with all you want, but I'm not...
Yeah, but like, Anthony, this is like saying if I had $1 billion in my bank account, blah, 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 but do you have $1 billion? No, I don't have it. So, like, it's it's a hypothetical conversation that doesn't make sense until you get past the first part.
No, well,
right.
we need to see that.
Exactly. I'm not going to go past the first part until you can absolutely demonstrate the truth of the premise. You don't get to say, I have a premise that I have absolutely no support for, but in order for me to continue this conversation with you, I need you to say yes to it. If in order for the rest of what I'm about to say to hold true, I have to base this on a premise that I'm not willing to support. And I'm saying, I'll go with you if you can support that premise to my satisfaction. Are you not willing to attempt to support that premise?
No, I'm
not going to go with you on the rest of the journey. Okay, well then support the premise.
Okay, well, let me just reestablish the premise and then support it. This premise is, if consciousness cannot be explained entirely in terms of physical processes, that means some aspect of our consciousness...
No, that's not the premise. You can't use the word if for the premise.
Exactly. You would have to say that consciousness is not, right? And then support that premise.
Okay, consciousness is not entirely based on physical processes. Therefore, some aspect of our consciousness continues after death.
No.
All right.
Not therefore. Support that premise before you get to therefore. First, you got to support that premise. So now we're at the point where you support that premise.
All right. Okay. When we examine the nature of the physical brain, which is where people believe consciousness is produced, there is, at the basic level, no mechanism or law or physical structure that we can point to that we can say produces consciousness. Okay?
We can't point to one physical aspect of the brain and say that it produces consciousness right now, but we can point to multiple components of the brain and say that they're inextricably linked to consciousness. I don't think that you would argue with that. Like, without a functioning brain. Okay, cool. So you're with me there. Without a brain, there is no consciousness. Like that for sure. Both of us can agree on.
No, I don't believe that. That's not true.
Can you think of an example of something without a brain that's conscious?
Like a spiritual being doesn't have a physical brain.
Something that exists demonstrably. Something that exists demonstrably, tangibly, that we can point to and measure.
All right.
No, so not your point is this. So you can't think of something that doesn't have a brain that is conscious. We'll agree on that, right?
Well, we don't know what's conscious.
Not that you can support with any kind of evidence. Not without yada-ing over it.
Well, some people say flowers are conscious because they respond.
I mean, they can say that all you want,
stimuli.
but then your definition of consciousness would kind of devolve into a little bit of nonsense, I think.
Well, they seem.
It certainly wouldn't be something that could be demonstrated, right? In the way that we would want it to be demonstrated for the purpose of this conversation.
I think it can be demonstrated, maybe not necessarily flowers, but there are organisms with very basic nervous systems, which could hardly be described as brains, which are reacting to they are single-celled organisms, which have no brains.
That react to their external environment reflexively. But
well, they're not reacting. They're making decisions. We can see them making decisions. They have a decision-making process, and they have no brain because they're one cell.
Well, I mean, it's a nervous system, so they're reacting reflexively based on a nervous response.
Okay,
they don't have a system.
But do you think that is do you think that is not those simple examples you gave are not explainable purely through physical processes? These choice-making mechanisms, for example.
Well, you asked me if there's an organism with consciousness that doesn't have a brain. I'm telling you,
and I'm asking you now,
don't have a brain.
Yeah, you gave us examples, which is great. And now I'm asking you if those examples have this ethereal or can't be explained entirely physically.
It would seem they can't be explained entirely physically, because how are they making decisions if they don't have a brain? There must be some sort of
how does a coin sorting machine sort coins without a brain? It's like these are physical processes.
Well, a decision is when a decision is made, the laws of physics are being violated as we know them. So the laws of physics are mechanistic, which means everything goes.
Name one.
Everything should.
Go ahead.
Name one what?
Name one law of physics
that's violated by decision making.
Violated.
I would say all of them. Gravity, for one, because
gravity is violated by decision making.
Yes, absolutely. Because
no, gravity
because
is
objects.
No.
Really? Do you think mass? Do you think that if I stop a coin from falling, that I have stopped mass from attracting each other?
If the natural tendency of gravity is to fall downward, right?
No, that's not what gravity is.
Okay. Well, gravity pulls you to the center of a larger object, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
so if you're a human being, if you're a human being standing on the earth and you stand up, are you not defying gravity?
No,
I'm applying greater
laws of gravity.
Gravity is still doing all the same work. Absolutely, you're overcoming.
So what?
You're overcoming the force of gravity temporarily with a greater force, just like you would agree that forces have different magnitudes, right? And greater forces win over lesser forces. Doesn't mean the lesser forces stop existing.
Let me put it this way. Okay, the force of gravity is not suspended, but you are acting in an unnatural way against the force of gravity, which would pull you towards the center of an object.
What?
It's still a natural. You're still operating within physics. If I stand up out of my chair, if I raise my arms above my head, nothing about the laws of physics are defied or suspended by me doing that. I am still operating within that paradigm without defying it at all.
Okay, I guess I'm not trying to say you're defying gravity or you're suspending gravity. What I'm trying to say is you violate the natural order of what gravity would dictate that you do.
No, I'm still gravity's still it's still gravitying when I'm moving around.
Okay, so what's the difference? How come when a human stands up, what's the difference between a human being and a rock? So a rock just sits there, it doesn't go up, but human beings can.
So you're attempting to say that our volition, so our ability as humans to move around in the world, is evidence that. So let's just say, like, if for your example, I think I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So I'm just going to try to steelman you as best I can. If we didn't have consciousness, we would just basically be lying flat on the ground because we couldn't act at all. But because we have consciousness, we are able to have motility.
Yes, that is exactly right. If we didn't have consciousness, we would be no different from a rock lying on the ground.
I gotcha. Okay. So I see what you're saying.
So a geyser? Sorry, Shannon, you go ahead.
Well,
a geyser's a good example. Like a volcano.
So a geyser must be conscious because it goes against gravity? What?
What I'm saying is there's a moment in time. I think his
symmetry, Baker, is that the difference between a geyser and us in this conversation for Anthony, I believe, is that we're making conscious choices and we're saying those conscious choices are natural. So if they're natural conscious choices, I can't get to the rest of it because I'm not sure I can follow him there. But I think that's what he's getting at, is that there's something that must be unnatural about conscious decisions. Otherwise, we would just be flat on the ground, not moving, I guess.
So
right.
Yeah, so there are robots, for example, that can do everything that we do, but are absolutely not conscious. Are they in any way violating any law of physics?
No, but we.
What about
we
robots?
Have a full Yeah, robots.
Like you could program a robot to move around. Yeah, sorry. I guess I blanked out while I was thinking of the exact same thing.
But a robot will only do what it's programmed to do.
But but you're saying you said the act of standing violates physics in some way that needs explaining. A robot can absolutely go from sitting to standing. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, but it's programmed to do that. It's programmed to do that.
But then
a robot will never do anything.
Oh, absolutely. Robots can absolutely do things that they were not programmed to do. There is absolutely, in large language models, there is emergent properties that people do not understand. The current state of AI absolutely has undesigned consequences in what's happening, because properties are emerging that people didn't specifically program it to do. But you were talking about the literal physical act of standing up.
Well, that actually wasn't going to be my main line of argument. We kind of got derailed into that. What I really wanted to focus on is the atomic structure. There is no identifiable source of consciousness.
What do you mean? That seems like a strange statement to make, because we can look at like a really microscopic level and we can see the actions that take place, and they're very, very well defined, and know what happens for neuronal firing.
I agree, they're well designed.
We can see the interconnectivity into other brain regions. We can see like the nodes and brain regions that react to certain things. So there's absolutely like a really well mapped structure of like, we know where we make decisions.
You would argue that we can identify the emergence of consciousness in brain activity.
I believe that we absolutely can. I think that there's still kind of like a mind-body problem where we don't know where it's unified. But I think that the only reasonable answer, given all of the models of consciousness that I've looked at, is a naturalistic one, because dualism has a real significant problem. Monism might be closer. Dualism definitely has a huge problem. I'm not sure what your model is, really, of what a soul might be. It sounds like it's a model that allows the soul to exist after death. But where most of these models fall apart for me is that there's a serious interaction problem, right? So if you agree that the brain absolutely does, create thoughts and behaviors, and we can see those happening, and we can see that at a macroscopic level, and we can look at brain regions, we can mess with those brain regions and see that we lose function or gain function as a result, like we know all of these things very, very explicitly, we know these things, then you would have to have some form of interaction, right? In order for these things to take place. Like we know where motility takes place. We know where like higher order thoughts, like type 2 thoughts take place. We know a lot of these things. So in any model that anybody would want me to accept, they would have to explain that interaction problem, because it can't go both ways. You can't have your brain communicating with your soul and then your soul communicating with your brain. Even one way would be a problem. Any way would be a problem because you have a serious interaction problem. That's the crux of it. That's what makes all of the models fall apart to me, is the interaction problem.
Okay, well, even if we can't explain the interaction model, we can theoretically determine that some interaction model exists.
No,
even
not
if we don't
really.
know exactly.
No, not really, because it would make crazy stuff happen, right? Because we know that in order for me to be able to process the thought that it took for me to have this conversation with you, or move my finger, or daydream, we know that there needs to be neuronal firing in order for any of that to take place. It does not take place without it, and we know the nodes in the brain where it does take place, right? So we can look at the brain and we can see what makes those neurons fire. So we know that there's an action potential required, and in order for that action potential to take place, you need to release a chemical in the brain called ATP. That ATP is produced in the mitochondria, and it needs to, and it opens up a threshold on either side of the cell membrane in order to create an electrical current when there's a certain concentration of sodium and potassium ions on either side of the cell membrane. So if for there to be an interaction at all, you would need to have that soul both convince the mitochondria to produce ADP at a specific rate in order to do what the soul wants when it wants it to, and you would have to actually physically create a physical state where there was a certain amount of sodium and potassium ions on either side of the neuronal cell membrane in order for that ATP to open the channel for them to travel back and forth to create the action potential for that neuron to fire. So that's a physical process. That's an absolutely measurable, discernible physical process. So if a soul can make a shift, like if my brain is ready to make one decision and my soul says, no, we're making a different decision, then you have to change instantaneously the physical constitution of my brain in a manner that would be absolutely traceable in every MRI that ever existed. And it's never been seen. The brain is a steady state, and you can always see what's happening is anticipated based on the existing physiological constitution of the brain. So unless you can show me a case, multitude of cases, it would have to be every case where all of a sudden we look at an MRI and the complete constitution of the brain just fires in a way that absolutely makes no sense, because we've now changed the physical construction of the brain in order for those action potentials to happen, in order for the soul to interact with the brain. Then maybe I'd believe you if the brain was doing some crazy unanticipated stuff. But unfortunately, for your argument, it's not. It's doing really mundane, very predictable stuff based on the physiological constitution of existing statuses of the brain that we know, understand, and can measure. So tell me where your interaction happens, because it can't be there. Or tell me why neuronal firing doesn't matter. Those are your only two options.
It does matter, but how do we know that the mind isn't what initiates every aspect of that process you just described?
How is the mind moving sodium and potassium around in the brain?
I don't know.
And why can't we see that happening? Why isn't our brain consistently in a flux state then? Because the brain would consistently be in a flux state, because it would be moving physical matter around.
Yeah, you said we can't see the mind operating, but how do we know the mind isn't made of a substance that our science can't investigate at this current time?
Well, then why do we need sodium potassium ion thresholds in order for neurons to fire? Why doesn't the mind just make neurons fire? Why did neurons die of cellular hypoxia if they lack the oxygen or the thresholds for that?
We need a physical body.
Why does cellular hypoxia even exist? Which is the entire existence of most of the endogenous DMT in the brain. It exists because we have a sigma-6 receptor on our neurons that if we go into cellular, which causes hallucinations, that if we go into cellular hypoxia, that sigma-6 receptor will take in our endogenous DMT DMT to like live a little bit longer, right? So that it can keep firing. But if the mind is what makes neurons fire, then none of those mechanisms are necessary. None of those survival mechanisms, none of those action potential mechanisms. They either are or they are not in your model, right? They either are physically necessary and it's a physical process, or whatever the soul is does it for us. And none of these physical processes are necessary. You can't have it both ways.
The soul operates through the physical processes. We have a physical body because we don't know, but it's logically deducible that my model is what's necessary fundamentally.
What is Occam's razor, Anthony?
We can't apply Occam's razor to a situation we don't know all the variables.
You don't multiply unnecessary entities. You have and there's nothing necessary that you've presented that this, like, so for example, dark matter explains certain things, right? So it's often thought of that for now we will tentatively say dark matter is a thing because it is a necessary entity for things. Shannon just described all kinds of processes where a soul is absolutely not necessary, but you're saying, how do you know there isn't one? So you are multiplying entities. You didn't demonstrate why one was necessary. You just said, well, you can't rule it out.
All right, actually, believe it or not, I think dark matter proves my theory, because dark matter is something that scientists have proposed based on what we observe in the physical universe. That is inexplicable.
Yeah, so what is that thing? What is the thing that you are? What is the thing? We understand the analogy of the dark matter. That's why I brought it up. So what is the thing that is unexplained that needs this soul so that we will just ignore all the other interaction problems?
Hold on, let me put it this way. Dark matter is to the physical universe what our mind is to our body. So we see things happening in the brain
that the mind explains.
The mind explains the initiation of the chemical processes in the brain. The mind is what explains the initiation of the chemical processes in the brain.
You're just saying that the mind is a sodium and potassium ion shovel. That's all you're just said. That's basically what you said to me.
Okay.
In which case it would be traceable, right? So you're saying that the physical processes in the brain are initiated by the mind. That's what I'm hearing you saying. So the mind being the soul, I'm guessing, is like an interchangeable synonym for you in this conversation.
Right.
So you're saying that the reason that sodium and potassium ion thresholds exist is because the soul physically places them there. So that means that the soul has a way of interacting physically with the world and can pick up and move sodium and potassium ions around, and also make cells produce, mitochondrial cells in neurons produce ATP. That's all necessary for a neuron to fire. We've already established that. So you're saying that the soul, the mind, picks those up, moves them around, configures the brain physically configures the brain such that neurons will fire in the manner it dictates. Now, the problem with your statement is that means that we would be able to measure the movement, because if the sodium and potassium ions that were around the neuron that needs to fire weren't present, the soul would need to move them there. They'd need to do one of two things. The soul would need to manifest them whole cloth, which means that the soul can just create matter, which I think would both agree is impossible, or the soul would be able to physically move them from one portion of the brain to the other in order for the neurons it needs to fire. Now, that can't be possible either, because we'd see it. The brain would be in a state of constant physical flux, because its physical constitution at a cellular level would always be changing minute by minute, moment by moment. And we don't see that. It doesn't happen. That's the interaction problem.
That's literally exactly what we observe. Yes, we do.
No, it's not.
We do observe it.
We don't observe our brains physically reconstituting themselves moment by moment. That's not what happens. ever. You can say, yes, we do all the time, but that's just not what happens. It's not.
That's exactly what an MRI is.
You can't be real right now. So you're saying that when I look at an MRI, what I see on an MRI, what I see on any brain scan is that the constitution of the brain changes. Every area of the brain is constantly just having ions fire all around, back and forth, constantly moving from one neuron to another, from one side of the brain to another. That's what would have to happen.
No,
That's what
you're
would
wrong.
have to happen. I'm not.
No.
I've never been more right. I'm so objectively right. I am absolutely objectively, degree on my wall. You don't know who you're talking to right now. Correct about this.
You've been brainwashed. I hate to say it.
By education? One of us has, I think, and one of us is willing to say when they're wrong, because I've said it before when I'm wrong. And one of us just hit a wall and went, nah, I'm right anyway. I'll let you guess which one of us it is.
Shannon, the mind is only going to interact with the parts of the brain that are necessary. I don't know why I have to say that.
All of the brain is necessary. All of it is necessary. Nope. It exists for a reason.
Nope. Nope. Well, yeah, at certain times, but not all at once. So there's a speech area. There's a visual cortex. There's
name a speech area.
Parts of the brain for high.
Name a speech area. Since you're such a brain scientist, name a speech area.
I think it's
what are the two primary speech areas that we know about called about?
I think one of them called Broca's area or something along.
Broca's and Wernicke's.
I know this.
Broca's and Wernicke's. What lobe are they on?
Okay, I knew one of them.
Yeah, what lobe are they generally on?
I believe they're on the temporal lobe.
You're correct. But which lobe are they correct? Are they usually on?
It's called the temporal lobe, right?
Which lobe?
I don't know. Is it more than one temporal lobe?
There's more than one lobe.
So so there's the temporal lobe. I'm not Googling. I know this. I've studied this.
Yeah. Which lobe?
See?
If you've studied this, you'd know what type and what are they affiliated with?
See, I'm not an expert. I know people will criticize me for saying that.
And they're mostly on the left lobe. Generally, sometimes they're on the right, but predominantly they're on the left and they're in the temporal. Like, you absolutely are wrong. You are wrong. We need all of the brain in order for the soul to interact with the brain. You haven't solved the interaction problem, Anthony. You haven't even come close. You're just asserting, nah, you're wrong, and our brain can just consistently reconstitute itself, which isn't the case, and we don't see it. That doesn't make you right. It makes you stubborn.
The mind reconstitutes the brain as is necessary.
No, it doesn't.
You also have not demonstrated what problem you're solving. You're just saying it. You can't prove it wrong, but I've yet to hear any articulation of what problem you're solving with this.
The problem is when you look at the physical structure of an atom, there's nothing that produces consciousness.
When you look at an H2O atom, Anthony, where is the wetness?
The wetness is a byproduct of how H2O molecules interact with each other.
What?
Okay? So it sticks to your skin.
What?
Yeah. So it sticks to your skin by...
So the same thing can be true for other things, right?
Certain type of bond.
So the same thing...
Tell me
you agree that you agree that you don't need to look for consciousness at an atomic level if you don't need to look for wetness at an atomic level.
I'm just asking, I can explain how wetness occurs purely in physical terms. Like, I cannot, this is what I would like to hear. Where does the consciousness come from in an atom? You got the neutrons, the protons, and the electrons.
Okay, you've defined consciousness as like 15 different things up front. You were willing to go anywhere for your corner of consciousness. So I'm still yet to hear what problem you're solving. Tell me what problem you were solving.
The problem is consciousness is an experience of the external world around us. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's an awareness. Where is an atom aware of anything? Where does awareness
Where
come
is an
from
atom
in an atomic
wet?
structure?
You don't. No, you don't.
Wetness is a
simile.
word.
Yes.
Wetness is a word. Wetness is a word that describes what we feel when water molecules bond to our skin. And we understand exactly how that bonding and that interaction occurs.
So when
based on the properties of matter.
So 2,000 years ago, you're very well. First of all, I still don't even see what I don't see what the problem is with. Shannon described all the brain interactions, and they all seem to my satisfaction answer that a collection of those things emerge to experiences. So I'm still at a loss as to what this gap is that you're explaining.
The gap is this. You said there's an experience. I'm telling you, where does an atom experience anything?
Oh God.
I'm asking you that. Where does an atom experience
an individual atom doesn't?
The same place where an atom is wet. It's not, no single atom is wet. And no single atom is aware of anything.
All right. Well, to be incredibly technical, and I'm not trying to, H2O is a molecule, not an atom, but that's just, I'm not trying to be pedantic there, but I just want, it's kind of getting to me a little bit. But we understand how molecules interact with each other based on their properties of the atoms within their structure. And that's what we describe using a word called wetness with water. With consciousness, you have to explain how you get from the physical structure of an atom to an awareness or an experience of the external world around you, or the atom, or the molecule. And I've never seen anyone even come close to proposing a model for that.
So you're telling me that you're very much God of the gap, your mind of the gapsingness, your consciousness of the gapsingness. Then
there's a gap. There's a gap. Fill the gap in for me.
So
where's the gap? Where's the gap? How
so you're conscious. Just to be clear, your consciousness of the gapping here.
Why not?
Your soul of the gapping.
What do you mean?
You're
why
saying
not?
Because we don't understand every single dot along the path.
You don't understand any dot.
We understand. It's like, okay.
We misunderstand so many.
We understand so many dots, right? Like if we were playing connect the dots right now, we would have like 80% of the dots. But you're saying because we don't have the rest of the dots, like we can see a good. No, we have a lot of the dots. But you're saying just because we don't have enough dots to complete the entirety of the picture, therefore there is no picture at all. Therefore, none of these dots matter anymore. And I'm just going to assert magic with absolutely no reason behind it. I'm just going to say that there is no picture at all, even though I can see a huge portion of the picture. Because it's not completed, that means it doesn't exist. And I'm saying, well, it does exist. I will admit that it's not completed. And you're saying, well, that picture just was that. Well, we'll just ignore every component of that picture that has been already completed. And I'm just going to say that my thing that can't be proven is right instead. And I feel as though I'm founded to do that because your picture's not complete. And I think that's unreasonable. And I think it intellectually vacuous as well. Think about how much we have found out, how much we have discovered, because we don't have the disposition that consciousness is just some magic thing that happens, because we're attempting to find out what it actually is, because we're delving and because we're doing science. If I had your disposition and attitude towards this mystery, no one would look at all. We would just say it's magic and walk away. We would lose our inquisitiveness. We would lose our attempts to find the real answer.
I disagree. I think people need to find the answer to what I'm asking. I think people are going to be looking for the answer.
You're not helping, though.
Yeah.
You could be a little more helpful.
I'm telling you,
you're telling me it's magic.
You don't want to acknowledge.
You're telling me it's magic. And I'm telling you it's not. And we're going to try to figure out exactly what it is. And you're saying, don't bother because it's magic.
Okay. Well, you're admitting to me that
you don't know,
and that I'm correct.
Anthony, of all the things we've learned so far, how many of them were non-physical?
You mean
of all the brain things we've learned so far? Let's say, do you think we know 25% of what's happening in the brain?
I don't know if I'd put a number on it, but we understand much more about the brain than we did decades ago. I'll admit that.
Cool.
But we don't
And how many of those things ended up how many of those things ended up being non-physical?
Maybe none of them, but it doesn't matter because we still can't explain.
So what makes you think that there is even a category of non-physical thing to explain the rest of it? You haven't demonstrated that it's even a category to consider.
Because it's the same reason scientists create this filler term called dark matter for the universe. It's like, well, there's something out there doing this, but we don't know what it is. So there must be something. We don't know what it is, but it's out there. I'm telling you that when we look at the brain, we don't know what's going on. We just
so
observe it happening. We can't explain it though.
You cut out for me for a second there. Did you go back to dark matter for a second?
I did.
Yeah. So dark matter, is anyone positing that dark matter is non-physical?
What else would it be? Right, unless you're going to admit there's physical things we can't detect right now, which how does that happen?
Well, of course, there's physical things we can't detect right now.
Okay, maybe the mind is one of those things. There you go. Point proven.
Maybe the mind is a physical thing we can't detect right now. That sounds like you're agreeing with us, but okay.
Whatever it is.
Did we have this whole fight just because you want to give a label to our gap in knowledge?
I wanted to explain to you that consciousness very clearly has no physical basis. And
no. You just agreed with me that it might be physical. You just agreed with me that it might be physical.
But physical in a sense that currently is not detectable by science. So whatever you want to call it, it's there.
No. You just said that physical is a possible category.
The point is, it's not contingent on the body. That's all that matters. You can talk physical, non-physical, supernatural, natural.
No. You did not establish that by any leap or bound.
I did.
We've established as a category of we don't know. And I'm asking how many things that have been solved in the we don't know go into the non-physical. And then we can even include dark matter in this because dark matter is still in the realm of we don't know.
Well, you could say, go to any point in scientific history. You could say, how many of the things we've discovered are not explicable in this term? And then they discovered something else. And it was like, okay, now we change our minds.
This is excellent. Did every scientific discovery has ended up being a naturalistic explanation?
No, I would say logically we can see that physical interactions are insufficient in this case. We need something more.
You have not shown what seems to be to you to be insufficient. You have not convinced anyone on this panel. You will need to come with something much better to say because that's like using the word impossible, right? Like insufficient. You're just making a category declaration. Because you're incredulous / credulous. You get that, right?
All I'm saying is you've given me no reason to think I'm wrong. None.
That's fine. Well, that's fine. You're holding on to but you've multiplied an entity, and then basically just declared that my entity is necessary because I am incredulous.
So, Paulogia, would you say you have faith that one day they will discover this explanation?
No, absolutely not. What I'm saying is until such time.
Sounds like you have faith. Sounds like you have faith.
No. I said when we don't know, I sit here and say, hey, we don't know. But I have yet to see something. But until such time as I'm aware that immaterial is a category, why would I posit something immaterial as a category? That's not a faith that it is material. It is reserving judgment until there's sufficient. Did anyone on this panel say we've ruled it out?
Okay, your faith is that one day they'll find a material mechanism.
No, it's not. That is not what are you deliberately not listening, or are you on the other side? Can you present
there's a problem. You acknowledge it. And you think that it will be found according to your
That is not.
presuppositions about how
When did
reality
I
works.
say that I think? When
I
did I
think there's
say
a
that?
better likelihood than your explanation, which is no explanation at all. And is basically tantamount to just saying that I have an answer that explains everything just by default, therefore it also explains this, is useless. It's functionally useless.
Well,
and I don't care for it because I would rather, I'm not done talking, because I would rather actually explore and find out what the answers are. And the more that we explore, the more we do find out. The more the gaps that you're talking about are filled. In my lifetime, do I think that we're going to solve the mind-body problem? Probably not. I absolutely don't think that that is going to be the case in my lifetime. Is it possible that we never do? It is. It's possible that we never do. But that doesn't make your answer likely. Your answer is nothing. Your answer is wind. Your answer is innocuous. Your answer is therefore it's magic, and I'm right and you're wrong because you don't have an answer. The difference between you and I is my inquisitiveness and my interest in actually finding real tangible answers leads me to explore the question in a way that leads us towards having more information than we did before the question was posed. Your position on this leads us to having no more information than before the question was posed. All it does is assert that the answer to everything, that is just the answer to everything by default, is also the answer to this. And that is absolutely devoid of any useful information, factual reality, testability, or information that in any way projects humanity or propels humanity towards knowing anything more than we already do right now. And if I have to pick between that and what I'm doing, I pick what I'm doing. And I'm not sure why you're picking what you're doing, because it's useless.
Okay. Well, I called in to ask you if you could show me where consciousness arises in an atom, and you didn't do it. So,
good. I didn't do it to your satisfaction. That's fine. Anthony, we are done. We have been talking for an exceedingly long amount of time, and we have gone in circles. I hope you have a great day, and thank you for your call. Goodbye. That's the end of that. Anyway, am I supposed to do more announcements? I'm the worst host of this show.
Eric, do you want to learn how to Mongolian throat sing? Check this out.
No, you try. No, keep that shit to yourself. Don't hear it.
Anyway, thanks for watching that clip. Patreon.com/calltheline is where you could support us. And maybe you should subscribe and like the video, because it was a killer video. Or maybe it wasn't. Was it a forest video? If this was a forest video, you don't have to click like. If it was an Eric video, go ahead and click dislike.